And the story of how God has led him to take this whole calling on that he has with the work in Ethiopia. Let me tell you a little more about him before he comes up to speak. Mike Adams is a follower of Jesus Christ, a husband to his wife Kim, and a father of 9 children, 4 of which were adopted from Africa. Mike is also a business owner and serves as president and CEO of Adams Thermal Systems, manufacturing of cooling systems for high horsepower diesel equipment with locations in Canton, South Dakota, Cedar Falls, Iowa, and also in China. As a child growing up, images on TV of poverty and starvation and famine deeply impacted Mike. In 2003, God called Mike to become a business owner and to start doing something about the suffering of the most vulnerable. Mike dedicated his business to God. And in 2013, God called Mike to do more than just give. God challenged Mike to take over full-time responsibility for the futures of 900 at-risk children in Ethiopia. And today, he's here to give testimony to God's faithful calling in his life. And so would you please welcome Mike Adams.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate this opportunity. Thanks for everyone here. I see a lot of familiar faces and some new folks, and just a privilege for me to be able to share a little bit, as Dave mentioned, what God has done. I'm going to start out by showing a little bit of a video here. So go ahead and start that.
The support we provide is not from us, but it is from God, since He called us here to be with you. እግዚአብሔር የሰጠን ገንዘብ ነው። እግዚአብሔር የሰጠን ገንዘብ ለዚህ ህብረተሰብ እንዲደርስ እያደረግን ያለነው
Hopefully you could see some of the words. I'm going to give you a little bit of the context to that if you couldn't see the words and hear some of the story. This video takes me back to the summer of 2013. I had received a call from an organization that we were supporting that was running 2 schools in rural Ethiopia, one in Hosanna and one in Toro. Toro was a more rural school that we saw, and we're going to talk about a little bit here today. They were being supported, I'm going to tell the story a little bit later as well, but they were being run by Children's Home Society up in St. Paul. And I got a call early in 2013, and we had about 90 days to decide. They said, hey Mike, appreciate the support over the years, we're going to close the schools. We just can't continue. And they were having some difficulty as an organization. And so they were going to have to pull out of Ethiopia completely. And so we had 90 days to determine whether it was God calling us to do something there. Otherwise, that was fine, no pressure, but they were going to close the schools. As you can imagine, Kim and I had been to those schools often, and I'll tell that story, but so I knew the impact that would have on those kids. Those kids wouldn't be going to school, and it would be devastating. It seemed impossible, though, by human standards. How are we going to go and, it's one thing to be in a support role, how are we going to go and take over? We don't have an NGO, we don't even have a nonprofit. We were just giving out of our proceeds at work, and so we weren't structured for that. Kim and I truly heard the Lord's voice to be faithful, and I will bring others to help. Now, I didn't know, you don't know what that really means, so I went and tried to find other NGOs to take over. We knew some folks in Ethiopia. We had worked down there, and so we went to different organizations thinking they would take it over. God was repeatedly saying softly, this is yours to step forward on. Well, sending checks is a wonderful thing, and coming alongside is absolutely necessary, just as it is necessary for us as in our foundation to have people doing that. But taking over 800 kids that are on the gap, they're stepping, the distance between them starving and things that can happen to them is very slim. They're really a razor-thin margin, I guess, on life is how I would say it. And also, Lord, it's the rainy season. We can't even get to a Toro. We're supposed to take this over. We've got to do some due diligence. I didn't look behind everything and investigate everything we were just supporting. And what this video shows is, there was 2 helicopters, only 2 helicopters in the whole country of Ethiopia. We're not getting in. And civil aviation is forbidden. Well, then it turns out that we did get a helicopter that was going to take us into a Toro. So I remember looking at my wife, and I didn't say this at the time, maybe I should, but I'm thinking, what if I'll ever see her again? As I started to head off on this trip, because you're thinking, there's 2 helicopters in the whole country. Who's going to fly this helicopter, right? Well, this is part of God's smile. A lot of you may know that I worked, and I'll tell that story, I worked for a company called Bayer for 10 years down in Kent, B-E-H-R. And they were a German company. So early on in my engineering career, I went back and forth to Germany a lot doing product development. I spent a lot of time in Germany. Well, wouldn't you know it, 2 German missionary pilots show up to fly this helicopter. I'm like, oh, thank you, Lord. I'm instantly comforted, right? And so I want to tell a little bit of the story today of that. One other piece of a God sighting on the helicopter trip is fog had rolled in, and folks, we asked, obviously the locals, we don't know how to tell the weather out there. We asked the locals. Now the reason we're on the ridge is because it was foggy and we couldn't get to a Toro. We landed on a small patch on top of a mountain, barely big enough for us to fit on. You can see the people running up, right, to see us. And they thought we'd crashed, and then you hear they're praising God because we're there. Then they hear we're connected to a Toro, woof, it's just crazy good. But they said, Mike, you're going to be here for quite a while. Might spend the night. The fog is not going to lift out of here, for hours. And we prayed, the fog lifted. And God was showing us things like that on this trip the whole way. But how did I get on the top of the mountain, in the middle of fog, on a helicopter like that? I want to tell you a little bit of the story of Adams Thermal first. So, my journey started with really another God-sized closing 15 years ago. And Bayer, the German company I was talking about, was going to close the facility in Canton. and I had a really nice offer to move to Detroit and be a chief engineer, and wouldn't that be wonderful? And they had, offered more than I really wanted, to be honest, to do that. But praying about it, I really felt that, number one, there was 180 people that I got to know in Canton at the plant that I couldn't abandon. But also I really felt like the Lord was going to do something here. But of course that doesn't make any logical sense, given what was in front of me. I called other businesses first, sounds familiar, like with the schools, and trying to tell people, hey, this is going to close, you're in heat exchange, why don't you go ahead and step in? And those doors closed repeatedly. I don't know how many tours I did at that time of companies looking to come in. Well, see, the problem was Bayer had already ripped up the long-term contract of our number one customer and said, we're not interested in your business because they were going to close. And by the time I was talking to Bayer and saying, hey, I think there might be another solution, a lot of things that happened. The other challenge with the factory, not of any fault to anybody, is it just had never made any money over the years, so it always struggled. So this was not really logically a good idea, right? So feeling like the Lord was in it, though, I'm talking to Kim, and we made an offer to Bayer, and of course contingent on financials, and that was my next step of learning, right? So in going to banks, I quickly learned, hey, banks don't lend to people that don't have assets, right? Or money. So I got a lot of no's as well. So I was like, well, okay, Lord, well then you're going to have to open some doors here. We don't have enough time for me to tell the story, but I know there's enough business people there that I wanted to at least give a flavor of some of this detail. But basically, God worked in a marvelous way that only He could. I had presented to a group of bankers. Some things happened, and God grabbed one of the bankers' hearts, and He gave me a loan. The other thing that we were able to do, which is at the same time I closed with Bayer, I sold the building to the Canton Economic Development. So that's how I got some cash to do that. Got the bank loan, and then I bought the building back after 5 years. Well, that was great. Working together with the city of Canton and the economic development there, which doesn't happen all the time. And that just is a God thing too. And then the company I worked for said, yeah, Mike, we'll let you pay us over 3 years, which never happens, right? In business, pretty much you don't do that. There's too much risk with that. Why would a global player do something like that? So anyway, that's how things got started, and I was able to buy Adams Thermal. We have a plant in Iowa, southern plant in Iowa. And if you look at that picture, the white roof there, the white roof is the original building. And we really experienced a season of growth and blessing from the Lord. All the way to the west or the left there is new. The warehouse in the back, and the building way far north is a fabrication plant we built. So we had a period of really dynamic growth, and one of the things that I wanted to really bring out too is I really felt God was calling me to tithe off of the business. That was the reason for being, not only to run the business and hopefully to try to do that well, which is a challenge every day, but to tithe off the top line sales. Not off of the profit, but off just take a percentage. It may be different for every business, but take a percentage off of the sales, set that aside for ministry. And I got to tell you, that has been such a blessing because that's opened doors. Because we've had, as I'll explain, we've had a lot of seasons of lean as well in that, but we just kept giving because that was the Lord's money, and the Lord has blessed me to be able to see what's happened with that tithe more than I think Kim and I could ever have imagined. Go ahead, Ted. Maybe that's not working. Okay. So this is a picture of our family, and this story, I'm going to back up even a step further back, though. This story goes back even further, as talked about a little bit in the intro. As a boy in the 80s, I saw images on TV of the famine in Ethiopia. And many of you, I'm sure, remember that, right? Seeing what was going on, starving kids. Well, I cried. You know, that broke my heart as a kid. And I remember telling God, or, you know, praying to God that, yeah, I want to do something about that someday. I thought I was going to be a farmer, is what I thought I was going to be doing. But Lord, I want to do something about that someday. Well, God, what I've learned in this journey, one of the things I want to really share with you is God has been continually preparing me, and I think He's preparing all of us for our next assignment. We're all here for a purpose, and God has an assignment for each of us. And providentially, He's been preparing us through the good times and the bad times for that next step. And this is a little bit of my story of how that happened. Now, the first step to Ethiopia, though, was through adoption. As you can see, we've got 5 biological children. And while my wife Kim was still pregnant with Josiah, I started worrying a little bit because she started talking about adoption. And Josiah hadn't even been born yet. And she was talking about it before then. And I could tell God was moving in her heart about the plight of the orphan. And she was studying it tirelessly, studying adoption, studying the plight of the orphan. The Holy Spirit was on the move. My desire as a child to serve the poor was about to intersect with her desire to serve the orphan. And as a couple together, our passions ignited around Ethiopia. God was at work. We made our first trip down to Ethiopia in February of 2008. And we had our adoption of our daughter Eva, who's all the way in the front, all the way to the right here. Try that again. Here we go. Okay, so our first experience with child sponsorship was in Zawai, Ethiopia. And there you see a picture of the mother lying on a mattress. And then Rahima's in the middle with her hands like this, right? And then her brother. And so we had our 2 older kids, Kinsey and Justice, along Kim and I. And so we were in the process of adopting, but we were also trying to figure out where the Lord wanted us to spend the tithe. We believed that was locally, nationally, and internationally. And internationally was Ethiopia. And as we were there, our daughter had selected Rahima to sponsor, and we had gone there. And her mother was, you maybe can't tell from the picture, but the area was soiled. Her mother was very ill. And we talked to the social worker there, that was with Food for the Hungry, and said, well, what's going to happen? And they said, well, her mother's going to die. She's going to pass away. And I remember thinking to myself, why am I here? You know, why did I bring at the time it was just our 2 kids, but why is Kim and 2 kids here to learn this? You know, what's going to happen to Rahima? She's already lost one parent, she's going to lose both. And we just asked, we said, well, can't we get her to a hospital? And they said, you know, Mike, there's no money to do that. She's not going to make it. And so we said, we will do whatever it takes, you know, get her to the hospital. And wouldn't you know it, it cost less than $20 to bring her mother back to health. Her mom had HIV, which is not talked about very much, and she was dying from that. Meanwhile, free medicine was available. And so we got her to the hospital, cost less than $20, and saved her life. And we go see them many times now since then when we go down to Ethiopia. And this is a picture of us together, and Rahima's in the blue there, and our family, we went there this summer and saw her, and her mom's doing great. That picture just shows Rahima, but we've just had a real opportunity, child sponsorship, to write to her, visit her, have an impact on her life, and we're just so thankful, Lord, for that. Go ahead, Ted. There's just another picture of our family and some of the kids there. Go ahead, Ted. Okay, so God continued His preparation for what was to come, and what you're seeing there is projects that we performed in Africa over the next few years. And so we were doing child sponsorship. We had employees at ATS that we would pay half of the sponsorship and encourage them to sponsor kids in Zawai. And we would take them on trips down there. It was just a great time, and the Lord was blessing it. A number of things up there. A-Hope is an HIV orphanage in Otis, and we engaged with that organization. And then we started some building projects. We built a library for a school, a water project in Abosa, a school without water is a pretty tough place, sanitation, all those things, so we put water in there. Up north in Ethiopia, we built a base camp so that social workers and so on could work out of that, and that was also for Food for the Hungry. And then one of our daughters is actually from Uganda. That's our youngest little one that was up there. She's a first grader, and we worked with a camp and clinic up in northern Uganda. And these are memories I'll never, that are precious. We went with our kids up there, and you're going way up north, and this is in the Gulu area, and there was a lot of devastation due to the military and war, and so there were girls up there that had been raped and discarded. And what we worked on was a camp and a clinic to bring these girls back in and to rehabilitate them in the name of Jesus. It was amazing what happened. And so we had a high school we worked on in Jiddo, so the Lord was really preparing us for what was to come. So a little bit of the history of the foundation. I mentioned in 2013 we were notified that these two schools were going to close. And this is a good example of God's timing. Doesn't always match our logic, right? At least my logic. Doesn't always align with how we think things should be. And again, God continued to say, I'm not going to send you in alone. And I'll be honest, I was used to doing things myself, right? A lot of us are like that. I can handle this. Even honestly giving up to that point had been, even though it was from the first fruits, it was still not excessively above what we could handle. I could do the math at the end of the day, right? And I think, I'm a pretty stubborn person, so God had to break me down and really demonstrate His glory in this way. And that's, I hope, what this story is going to tell and teach or show us is, as many of you know, what was happening in 2013. I have to explain that Adams Thermal, we became pretty reliant on the ag market. We were selling cooling systems for tractors, combines, everything in ag, and we had become a little less diversified. We were still doing automotive and truck, but a lot of it was ag. And well, in 2013, corn went from $7 to $4, and then it went like to $2.80 the next year. What do you think was happening to our sales, right? We were in a crash mode, going down. Just a couple statistics, 2013, so God's coming and telling us, hey, there's 90 days to take over these schools, I'm going to be with you. Well, we lost $4 million as a plant. We were tanking. Make matters worse, sales continued to plummet. In 2014, we lost 50% of our sales. In 2015, we lost another 50%, almost 50%. And we bottomed out in 2016 at about 30% of the sales we had in 2012. And this is the time when the Lord's saying, you need to step forward. This is your time to take on a very significant economic liability and help these kids. So, God was calling us to faithful obedience, and it was only in that broken place that I think He could really, He could demonstrate His power. He was going to demonstrate His power with that. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment, but that was the scenario in 2013. We also had to get our 501c3 status pretty quickly. There was a lot of pressure in Ethiopia. When somebody leaves the country, like a lot of third worlds, guess what happens to any assets on the ground? They're going to be gobbled up, they're going to be gone. This is going to be over. And somebody in the business community may be taking it, or whatever happens with connections with government, it was going to be gone. We didn't have much time. And so we had to get our 501c3 so we could get our NGO license in Ethiopia. Well, I was talking, to our attorney about that, and of course he reminded me, and many of you may remember, that faith-based groups were not exactly getting their 501c3s through very quickly, right, at that time. And so it was expected to be 2 or 3 years. Well, we couldn't, no, it had to be less than a year. We had to get it done in a matter of months, or it was over. All of this wouldn't have mattered. Well, God stepped in, and we got, in a matter of months, the 501c3. Authorization came through the mail. Boom, done. Another stamp from the Lord. So we launched the foundation. I want to talk a little bit about our mission statement, just kind of truncated here. Our mission statement is we strive to alleviate the suffering of the most vulnerable, confronting all forms of poverty in our community, our nation, and in our world. And when we talk about confronting the most vulnerable, we feel like God's called us to that, and also all forms of human poverty. So here we're talking about physical poverty with Ethiopia, right? They're not eating enough and those basic needs. But we're also focused on spiritual poverty. We think about what's happening in the U.S., relational poverty. We can learn about my own relational poverty by just going to Ethiopia. So that's kind of our vision that we strive to do locally, nationally, and talk about the international component today. Christ-centered, holistic, gracious, excellence, and good stewardship are some of our values. This is a snapshot of our operations and just kind of how it's structured. So we've got a 501c3 here based out of Canton, South Dakota. And then we've got our NGO, another 501c3, basically wholly owned subsidiary, operating as an NGO in Ethiopia. We have an office in the capital, and then we've got the 2 schools in Hosanna and Toro. Go ahead, Ted. Okay, thanks. A little bit of a snapshot of our operations. Here you can see we've got, in our office in Ethiopia, we have 11 staff that kind of run the program. Country director, head of HR, we've got the finance department. That's really been helpful in a country like Ethiopia to be in the capital, be able to engage. Obviously, we're not doing bribes. It takes longer for us to get things done, but having that presence there has been critical for our stability there. And then in Hosanna and Toro, you can see the statistics there. Over 500 kids in both schools. Both have meal programs now, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The meal program is absolutely critical. Those kids aren't eating. We have another program called Accelerated Learning. I'm pretty excited about this. Not only do we have the kids in the schools, but many kids aren't going to school. And so Accelerated Learning, we take 1,500 kids through 3 grades in 1 year. And these are different kids that are in our schools. So you might say, let's say a 10-year-old has never been to school. Why wouldn't they go to school? Well, they have to do subsistence activities for their families, and the families starve. They're going to gather water, they're going to gather sticks, they're going into the marketplace to do menial tasks and just gain very little bit of money. But if they don't do that, the family's going to starve. So the way that we bring kids into our schools is we make a contract with the family and we get them into self-help groups. So the Accelerated Learning also takes those kids when they do 3 grades in 1 year, now they can go into school. And then the self-help groups, we have over 500 ladies, the moms, in self-help groups. 20 women in one group. This is amazing to see what these ladies do. Basically we're training them on how to do different business skills, and then they basically, they might make clothes, food, they do a lot of different crafts, and we're wanting to broaden that out. We've got some ideas on broadening that out, but what you see is when you go to a self-help family, before and after, it's amazing what they have, and the pride those women have, and they're bringing income into their families. Typically, if we have a lot of orphan families where they may be missing one or the other, but if dad's doing subsistence farming, and just trying to make it. And so that additional income also raises the status of women in their families and in their community in such a good way, and they're so proud, and they're so focused on the Lord. They do it for their kids and their family. They're focused in the right place. We also provide medical support, HIV treatment, and we do some gardening and teaching some things on the grounds there. This is a picture of Hosanna, and you can just give you a few pictures of the school there. And then that's a picture of the high school, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. The high school was just recently built, and that is a story in itself that I want to tell. But, you know, when the kids go through 8th grade and they stop, their progression, they can't go on to college. The high school is their way, high school and preparatory school we call it, grades 11 and 12 are preparatory school. If they do well there in Ethiopia, they go to college for free. But these kids can't get there, right, unless they have a school to get them there. This is an aerial picture, I think, from the helicopter from a trip of a Toro. You know, it's kind of like paradise out there, but obviously very poor. But this is a picture, just give you a sense of the scale. You know, so you've got, you know, between 500 and 600 kids that go to school there. Incidentally, in a Toro, there's 1,000 kids waiting to go to school. So good. It's a bad statistic, but it's a good statistic for our work, what the Lord can do. This is a typical family that you might find in Ethiopia. We talk about that subsistence farming. They've got a hut behind them. A lot of times the animals they might bring into the hut at night, and they'll sleep right there. You can see here they've got the uniforms. They've got three kids that are going to our school. Typically, we only allow one child per family. Sometimes because of special circumstances, we allow more. So this is a family that had 3 kids that were in our schools. Self-help group, this is just a picture of a gal. We built these looms and then we're training them so they can make everyday blankets, scarves, things that they can sell in the marketplace. This is really fun. I mean, when we were there in January, we're opening up a shop in the marketplace at Hosanna so they can sell their goods. Wow, these ladies, you know, too bad I don't have 10 videos of that. They're just so excited. And again, so selfless and selfless in what they do and how they spend the money. It's all for the kids and their families. So that's the kids in the Toro, and so many blessings, those kids. You know, so many blessings in so many ways, and then you go see the kids. And yes, they're praising Jesus. You know, they are all in for the Lord and praising His name. And that when you're there and you see what God is doing, all the words of Scripture, Matthew 25, other Scriptures, jumps out at you and says, okay, Lord, I understand you're here and what you're doing. This is just a little bit about our staff. Our staff in Addis and also in Hosanna and Toro, they're all Ethiopian. They are all employees that love the Lord and are bought into the gospel. They have hearts for the children, have hearts for children in poverty, obviously providing jobs for the staff, but more importantly, they're our hands and feet really when we're not there, right? They're the hands and feet of Jesus there on a daily basis. And they just do such a marvelous job and show love for these kids. Many of these kids, you know, are fully orphaned, And so they don't have mom and dad, they may be living with another family or relative, and the school is really critical for them, and it's really that hope that they have amongst the turmoil around them. So our vision for the Ethiopia, as I shared, it's a platform for the gospel, at number one. The poorest of the poor receive the best education. You know, our schools they are the best schools in their area by far. They're number one. These are the poorest kids that aren't eating in many times, but they're the best on the test scores. But we want to do more than that. We want to have an international standard that we can educate these kids to, so they can be successful globally and be future leaders in their countries, in Ethiopia. Body, mind, and spirit, nurturing these kids holistically. Accelerated learning is preventing the dropout rate. You know, taking that dropout rate that we see around us and taking at least 1,500 kids a year through that, getting them back into school, getting families self-sufficient is part of our vision through the self-help groups. The schools as community centers to support the families, doing activities through the schools and the things that we build there, centered around Christ. And a really important point for us, and I think for a lot of people many times, is that 100% of the funds go to Ethiopia. They go to the program. One of the blessings of having, a lot of you guys are engaged in business here. One of the blessings of having the foundation bolted to a company. So maybe the name's a little bit clunky, right? Maybe we need to come up with something different than Adams Thermal Foundation. What's that, right? And they sell heat exchangers, but so maybe we need to work on our name, right? Until we haven't gotten around to that yet. But the fact is, we can take that part of that tithe that the Lord's provided, and we pay all the overhead. So any overhead in the U.S., we pay the folks that are in Addis, so our staff in Addis, we pay for that and make sure that every dollar that's given by child sponsorship or otherwise goes down to the schools. And so that's been a blessing. Some God sightings, some of these I've already covered, but going from writing checks to taking action, I think both are really important, right? But God is calling us to be a little deeper involved in these two particular schools. His promise to bring others alongside. You know, in 2015, we also had some significant pressure. So you talk about 2013, the company's not doing well. Next few years, a lot of you may have experienced that with the ag economy. And yet we continue to just drive forward and be faithful, knowing the Lord's going to provide. But I don't think we would have quite seen what God was going to do if we hadn't hit bottom, and still persistent. Be faithful, be faithful, be faithful. That's one of the messages also I want to share with you, that from my own experiences, God sometimes just calls us to be faithful. Sometimes things aren't perfect. A lot of times they're not. They're messy. It isn't working out like we thought. And God is just calling us to be faithful. I think a lifetime of being faithful, God rewards in His time. And we saw that. One of the things that happened in 2015 is our children, in what's horrible, and this had always been the case, getting high academic marks that I mentioned, but they were basically starving. It was I can't talk too much about it without tearing up, but it was difficult. And in Hosanna, we had gotten land from the government, but to build a high school. And but developers were starting to circle that land, and one of them had actually zoned a road right through our school. They were taking over because we couldn't get there. We weren't in a position to do the capital projects that we needed to do. And so things were looking tough, and we were continuing to pray. And it wasn't at the last moment, maybe it felt like it sometimes. And then God acted in a very powerful way, and God sent people. And I want to tell a little bit of that story now through pictures, but before I go to that story, one of the things that we learned is when we went over to Otoro, and after we announced some of the good things I'm going to share with you, and we met with the parents and the elders, it was amazing because they basically said, you know, we knew you were going to come, and we've been praying for 30 years for you to be here, and you're here now. Praise God. It's not about you. Thanks for being here. Praise God. God is the Lord. And we realized that in this tapestry, in this history that was going on down there, we were just a small part. You know, and God was using us in this time to answer their prayers. You know, we were praying and all this. I'm pretty sure God was answering their prayers. I think maybe it was listening to ours, yeah. But their prayers, prostrate on the ground day after day after day, God answered those prayers, and we were just blessed to be part of it. So my personal experience with this is, you know, I'm a business owner and in business like a lot of you folks are, and I'm thinking, all right, Lord, now's the time, you know, and I'm not, call it pride, call it shyness, call it whatever it is. I'm not someone to go around and ask for help a lot. And people sought us out, you know, and $1 million were raised in capital. I don't feel like I even ever asked for it. God just sent people and said, Mike, do you have some schools in Ethiopia or something like that? You know, and then off it would go. And it was just amazing, and I want to share that a little bit in pictures. One of the first things that happened for our kids in the Toro was we had a gift, and it's actually someone in this room. We had a gift that said, particular individual, I've been invited to a meeting, and they said, you know, I think the Lord's asking me to give. Boom, just in the meeting. I wasn't done with the pitch yet. And so we were able to build a kitchen in a Toro, and a dining hall, a place for the kids to eat, and a storage facility in a Toro to feed these kids. And so that was how things started, right when we were at kind of our wits' end. And if you look in the upper left there, that high school, fully funded by Christians in Sioux Falls, that saw us out and said, I think we're supposed to do something here. Amazing. We had a truck. We didn't know how to get food to a Toro, and a group in Minneapolis, and a larger group led by a group in Minneapolis bought the truck. So we could get grain and so on into a Toro. And then you can see on the right there, a Toro also didn't have any water. Now we have a big water project we're bringing to the community of Toro, but even just getting temporary water set up, that's the first time they turn on the water. Yeah, they're using a hose that actually goes to a nice system and so on. And just to see the joy of those kids when they had water for the first time, oh my. And of course we couldn't do a food program without water. But think about the sanitation for years and years without water. So God really acted in just a powerful way when we needed it most. And go ahead and go to the next slide, Tad. And now I'm going to go grab a book because I forgot to bring it up to the podium. But this gives me an opportunity to show the book. So on one of my trips to Ethiopia, I had a friend that gave me this book. It's called Chase the Lion by Mark Batterson. Okay? Remember that if you haven't read that yourself. And I was on a flight to Ethiopia, and I want to read this book. Talks about 2 Samuel 23, verse 20, and it's one of David's mighty men that chases a lion into a pit and kills him. And it's talking about the faith of David's mighty men. And the book talks about challenging us as Christians to be bold and do more. And it had a big impact, particularly in this time frame of what we're up against. And so I recommend the book, but I want to read the Lion Chaser's Manifesto. Here it goes. Quit living as if the purpose of life is to arrive safely at death. Run to the roar. Set God-sized goals. Pursue God-sized or God-given passions. Go after a dream that is destined to fail without divine intervention. Stop pointing out problems. Become part of the solution. Stop repeating the past. Start creating the future. Face your fears. Fight for your dreams. Grab opportunity by the main and don't let go. Live like today is the first day and the last day of your life. Burn sinful bridges, blaze new trails. Live for the applause of nail-scarred hands. Don't let what's wrong with you keep you from worshiping what's right with God. Don't let what's wrong with you keep you from worshiping what's right with God. Dare to fail. Dare to be different. Quit holding back. Quit holding out. Quit running away. Chase the lion. So that is a great book. It talks about being bold and about living out our faith. And that was really meaningful for me. And so, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit today. I really feel like, again, going back to maybe what I said in the beginning, from being a boy and a child to now, I really feel like God has been weaving those pieces together. I didn't always see it. And I know He's doing that for all of us. And then to weave kind of the passions of my wife and I together was awesome. We served just an awesome God. So I want to challenge you today. I want to talk a little bit about child sponsorship. Only if God's calling you to this. Child sponsorship is the gospel in action. I really believe that. And I've shared a little bit of my passion about that and why I feel that, some of the experiences we've had. And so on your tables are child sponsorship packets. And just pick one up, take a look at it. Doesn't mean you're taking one today, but take a look at that. On the back, it has some statistics about a child, and there's a card inside. And I would just like to give you an invitation today to sponsor a child if that's something you feel God calling you to do. Some of you are already sponsoring a child, but if this is something that God's calling you to do, take a look at that. Afterwards, we've got the table here that we would be more than happy to help you with that. You're able to write back and forth to a child, and more importantly, too, go see the child if that's in God's plans. And I would also maybe ask for an invitation from some of you that are in a workplace, and I know all of you have influence in that arena. Invite us to your workplace. One of the things that we were really blessed with is, and what we did is this is even before it was our school, so when it was other schools, we would pay half of the sponsorship, just as an organization. So we'd say, hey, if you want to sponsor a child, we're partnering with Adams Circle Foundation, and we'll pay for half of it. It's $34 a month. You only have to come up with half. The blessings that you can give your employees in that, as they write back and forth to that child, even if they never go and see those pictures and see what's going on, because we're also able to go down and bring reports back and do really neat things. And again, 100% of that goes to the child, or goes to the organization down there. So just Tad, why don't you just slowly go through the pictures there. So you've got some folks that have done that in different trips, going and seeing that sponsored child. They're going to sponsor a child. They step into the gap in Jesus' name. And it's a big deal. Kids that are sponsored in our schools, wow. They know someone that's praying for them. They may not have a mom or a dad. That's our daughter Malia with Bertuka and her sponsored child. It's also an opportunity for you to, if you have a child at home, or, we all have the same challenge, right? If you've got kids at home yet, the culture is just roaring, right? And I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that. And this is a way to kind of slow things down and put a good perspective in place of what true needs are and the gospel in action. James 1:27 says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God, the Father, is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. The first part's important. I'll tell you what, I also find that doing this helps the second part too, right? Because we have so much time and so many things that we can do with our finances and so on. Not all that's good for us. God blesses us tremendously. A lot of it is good. But this has helped me in both of those, in being engaged. And just lastly, a couple things we've got. On Sunday, we've got an evening, we're doing a celebration of what's going on, what God has done in Ethiopia, and we've got a dinner It's doors open at 5:30, starts at 6:15, and there's still, if you go on our Facebook account, you can sign up. We'd love to have all of you there. If you want to go a little bit deeper, it's a great time to just see a little bit more of what the Lord's doing. And then maybe save the date, June 1. Stan Graber has been very gracious in helping us set up a golf event, a fundraiser for the children, so that's coming up, so save that date, and we'll have some more coming out in the near future about that. So again, thanks so much for having me today and being here. You've really blessed me in that, and I'll turn it back over to Dave.
Thanks, Mike. What an amazing story of what God does when a person steps out in faith and fully commits to His leading. It's just amazing to see. And I had the privilege of going firsthand, as I mentioned before, to go to Ethiopia in January with a group of about 20. And some of those people are in the room. I know Kent Houston, Tom Gage, Dave Munson, Chuck Jesperson, Tad Anderson in the back, and of course Mike and others that were there. Just a tremendous experience. The picture that you're seeing right now is a picture of the family. Well, the girl in the back, in the middle, with the red on, the red vest there, that's Konji, excuse me. And she is the girl that Shirley and I sponsor. And so I had the privilege that afternoon to go down and meet her family and spend some time with them. They didn't speak English, but we had an interpreter along, and we sat down in their house there, and all dirt floor, pretty nice home compared to some that I've seen there this year. But it was amazing to talk with them. We gave her a backpack and some gifts, and they were just so gracious and appreciative. She just loved it, and just to see what it was like, and to see the help that she's receiving firsthand. What an amazing thing for us to be able, for me to be able to see that, and know that that work is going on like that. And we had a chance to speak with a lot of the students there and just hang out with them over that couple days over there on the sites, on schools, the two different schools. And one day, as we were touring the new high school that we showed on the pictures, I got a chance to hang out with a couple first-year high school students. One was named Enoch, and one was named Nazarene. And it was just a pleasure talking with those guys. They were just full of life, and they were just, they were asking me so many questions. I couldn't believe it. On about any subject you could think of, they were asking questions. And we were just talking for about 40 minutes there, and then during that time, Nazarene, he was speaking of his relationship with Christ, and he just started talking about it on his own. And he said, I know it was at least 3 times he said this. He said, Jesus is life. He goes like that. And he said it with his whole being, not just his lips. And it was just exciting to see that the gospel was going in deep into the core of those students. Not just what the education they're getting and the help they're getting physically through meals and clothing, but everything. And it reminded me, as I kind of reflected on this coming back, it reminded me of, there's a passage in Acts 10, and it says 36 through 38. It talks about Jesus and his ministry. And it says that he went around proclaiming the gospel, announcing it, because this was the new covenant, the first time, announcing the gospel around Israel. And then it says, a little later down, it says, and he went around doing good. And so you see both there, the proclamation of the gospel and the demonstration of the gospel by showing love and showing God's love to people. And he did that in many different ways, and just a couple of them. You remember the Sermon on the Mount? There was over 5,000 people there with the women and children. Could have been up double that. But that day, he didn't send them away hungry. It had been a long afternoon as he spoke on the mountain there. And he sent them away with a meal and made their lives a little bit better that afternoon. And then there's other examples of Jesus' ministry of healing. One of them was the 10 lepers. And remember, he healed all of them, and only one came back and thanked him. But he did it anyway because he did good, as he went around doing good too. And as it talks about in the scriptures, but it's amazing to think of those lives that were changed for a lifetime then because of the healing they received. And then, of course, he shared the gospel everywhere he went and talked about being born again and what that means to have a relationship with God and have your sins forgiven. And so he changed people's lives for eternity, and he continues to do that right up to this moment and into the future, if you will. And so he did all three of those things. And as I thought about what we witnessed there, what I witnessed firsthand there in the two schools and the work of Adams Thermal Foundation, they're changing those kids' lives and their families. Like you said, there's 500, I think, in self-help groups. And it's just amazing to see that, what they're doing on that end of it. So they're changing their lives for the present by food, clothing, those kind of things. They're changing their lives through education for the future so that they can go on and get a good job and be able to support their family and to help others, to also pass that on. And then, of course, changing our lives through the gospel as they're proclaiming the gospel, them sharing the gospel, helping them to grow in their faith. Those students and their families are having their lives changed for eternity. And all three of those things are going on. And so it's just a really cool thing. We give, like I said, we support Conjit and her family that's around her. That's her extended family. I was going to point out her sister also is going to school. She's sitting down in the front row. And then the others are her siblings and extended family. They all live in the same house there. But we support some other kids with other ministries, and I think that's great, all these ministries that are doing these things. I haven't had the privilege of going firsthand to see that those children, we've written to them and stuff. My hope and my prayer is that they're doing the same kind of thing, that not only helping them physically and educationally, but also spiritually with the gospel. That's deeply embedded in them. And I don't know about them, but I know about Adams Thermal Foundation, and I highly recommend that you would think about sponsoring a child. And I think it's like $34 a month. And we have so much here. We're so wealthy in the United States, and they have so little. It's amazing, though, the joy that they have, even though they have so little. There's such a friendly people and such a joyous people, too, to be around. But my prayer today is that you would consider, if God's leading you, that you would consider sponsoring a child and helping them out with these sponsorships. So let me close in prayer here. Father, I just thank you for this afternoon, for coming together to share this meal together, to hear Mike Adams to share his heart and the calling that you've laid on his heart. I thank you for his foundation. I thank you for his business. I thank you for his staff. I think of Tad Anderson, who went with us, and others on the staff that down in Ethiopia. How gracious and how such a servant's heart that they had. And just I thank you for how you gifted Mike to do all these things, and you called him, but you've also led him to grow in his faith and to become faithful in his commitment to follow you, no matter what, good times and in bad. You were there and for him, but he was leading you, and he was moving forward. I just thank you for that. So I just pray that you would touch the hearts of the people here in this group today, that you would want involved, and that we could see more sponsorships come out of this. I thank you for this time together too, and just visiting in community here, the body of Christ, and experiencing this meal together too. And so go with us as we leave this place. In your name, amen. Thank you so much.